into the room, passing out $100 bills, and it kills and it thrills like the horns on my Silverado grill. And I buy the bar a double round of Crown, and everybody's getting down in this town. Ain't never gonna be the same. 'Cause I saddle up my horse and I ride into the city. I make a lot of noise 'cause the girls, they are so pretty. Riding up and down Broadway on my old stud Leroy, and the girls say, save a horse, ride a cowboy. Everybody says, save a horse, ride a cowboy.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Today, I am directly asking the Biden administration to allow the Texas Department of Public Safety to access this facility across the street at the K. Bailey Hutchinson Center, as well as the other federally run facilities in Texas, to be able to talk to these unaccompanied minors. We must get to the bottom of the human trafficking and put an end to it.
Those are the words of Texas Governor Abbott in Dallas. As you heard him say, he was just across the street from that hotel, or actually I should say the convention center, the K. Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center, where FEMA is now housing some 3,000 teenage boys ages 15 to 17. And supposedly they could be staying there at that center for up to 90 days. Governor Abbott says all of this is a direct result of Biden's reckless open border policies. He's making some very good points along that line, and he also points out that when we're trying to understand what's going on in there, when we're trying to understand what's going to happen next with these folks and where else they're going to go, and other cities are going to end up with them at some point, but are they going to be told in advance, or are they just going to be dumped into their city? We were told over and over again, this presidency will be the most transparent in history. I don't know how they spell transparent. Maybe they spell it as blindfold or something of that nature, because they're not being transparent on this at all. They're hiding, they're shifting, they're reorganizing, they're redescribing terms. It's not a crisis, it's a challenge. And we don't have detention centers, we have reception centers, as if that's going to make everything better. But Governor Abbott says we have to consider what's going on in reference health. I mean, if COVID is a big deal, and of course, keep in mind, in Texas, the governor said last week the state can open up, no more mask mandate. The city of Austin, because its blue leadership decided we are going to insist on masks still in Austin, and now the city and state are involved in a suit going back and forth. But if there's a jump in COVID cases, you know they're going to be blaming, the left will be blaming the decision by the governor to do that. Not all the illegals coming across, not even just the ones that are captured and put in some of these reception centers, but those who didn't get stopped. So again, the Governor Abbott saying, we're not getting any good information from the Biden administration.
The Biden administration is not being transparent with either the governor of Texas or the Texas Department of State Health Services. We need to know what the health situation of these kids are. We need to know if they've been exposed to variants of COVID. And if so, is it the Brazilian variant or whatever type of variant?
And that's a critical issue. We're being told that some of these variants may or may not be affected by the vaccine. And they mentioned the Brazilian variant. Now, that's another one that suddenly surfaced. Will it be different? Will it be something that can not be handled by the current vaccine? We don't know. There'll be a lot of that stuff. It's very much like every flu season normally. We have a vaccine given for the flu, and it may end up not being that strain that hits us that year. And speaking of the flu, have you heard of anybody having the flu lately? No. And if they have anything like that, I think they're saying it's COVID. Now, I've got to take a moment to share this. Let me go off to the side here for a moment. I saw this cartoon put up. Actually, it wasn't a cartoon drawing. It was showing a couple of people, three people talking, and the woman said, well, he died a natural death. And the guy at the desk saying, you pushed him off of a cliff. And she said, well, gravity is a natural death. And he said, all right, I'll just put it down as COVID. I have no doubt some of that stuff's been going on to some extent, and that's been the confusing part for a lot of Americans. You don't know what to believe. It's Dr. Fauci one day, put a mask on, don't put a mask, double mask, maybe no mask. Maybe we can open schools? No, we can't open school. I told you before, it reminds me of what I call a blinker philosophy, a turn signal philosophy. It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. That's what they're doing. Well, right now, it's gotten to a bigger issue now in the border states because we have had 100,000 come across the border since all of this has suddenly opened up under the Biden administration, and they are expecting even more. I mean, and the problem in Texas, again, as it is elsewhere, the law enforcement agencies have their hands tied. Listen to Governor Abbott.
Our law enforcement, the Texas Department of Public Safety, they need to do their job. Part of their job is making sure they track down and prosecute anybody involved in smuggling. Once the kids get over to the state of Texas, they are still involved with coyotes and smugglers and people like that we do have the ability to arrest and put behind bars. The Biden administration is not letting us gain access to that information so that we can arrest and prosecute those who are assisting this immigration process.
And when that happens, law enforcement is handcuffed themselves. And as always said, the Biden administration has been very touchy about using the word crisis. They don't like that word. Crisis indicates that we don't have control. Memo to the Biden administration. You do not have control. If you have to send FEMA in, you're sending the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which in its own name says emergency, tells me that you don't have control. But they're just trying to gloss it over. It's kind of like the kid that sticks his finger into the cake icing, gets a little bite. Mama comes along and sees it. Oh, so she smooths the icing over so nobody knows somebody's finger has been in it. This is what we see with the Biden administration. Cover up, conceal, ignore, deny, constantly. And yet, how many times have we talked about the threat to these children in particular and the smuggling, the child smuggling that's going on? I would love to hear one leftist, one Democrat tell me why they think it's good to let children be smuggled across the border and maybe put into a sex den somewhere to be used as a toy and eventually death. Chuck Fleshman, Congressman Fleshman, Republican of Tennessee. He said these border and immigration policies from Biden are fueling a humanitarian crisis that is hurting and killing migrants, and particularly children. He said these poor human beings are being abused. It's dangerous. Many are sick. Many are dying. And to the great credit of the U.S. and our great humanitarian heart, once they get here and are in the facilities, they are being fed 3 meals a day at tremendous cost for the taxpayer. But before they get here, it's a disaster. And pointing out that transnational criminal cartels who smuggle drugs and people are beneficiaries of the Biden administration's open border policy. As he said, the coyotes, the cartels, every ill actor are benefiting from this, and Biden is doing absolutely nothing to stop it. And adds, in fact, that cartels are taking advantage of the migrant families. They charge a lot of money to bring them across. We had that point made yesterday. The Biden administration, by this action and inaction, is actually funding drug cartels. Now, I know they say, well, we're not. Yes, you are. If you're allowing them to make money doing this, you might as well be opening up a door for them to sell their drugs somewhere then, because they're going to do it anyway, and sell children. Governor Abbott says it's clear to him the Biden administration is clueless.
Last week, I was on the border and I talked to Border Patrol officers, and they told me at the time that the Biden administration had not provided Border Patrol officers with COVID vaccines. And I called out the Biden administration and said they needed to correct it, and they did. My hope is that the same thing will happen this time, and that is I've called out the Biden administration for not allowing us into these facilities, for not cracking down on human trafficking, for not addressing the COVID situation of these children, as well as the welfare of the children, as well as not even having facilities capable of taking care of these children. The Biden administration is not prepared for the massive inflow of humanity that's coming to the Lone Star State. And so I hope that they will respond to this plea as quickly as they responded to the one I issued last week.
But he's not holding his breath. I want to share a piece written by Chris Kobach. It's an opinion piece. He served as the Secretary of State of Kansas 2011 to 2019. He's an expert on immigration law and policy, was an informal advisor to President Trump. He did co-author the Arizona SB 1070 immigration law and represented in federal court 10 ICE agents who sued to stop Obama's 2012 DACA executive amnesty. Here's what he writes, and I mentioned this a moment ago. The Biden administration has been touchy about using the word crisis to describe the catastrophic flow of illegals across our border ever since he took office. Most Republicans think it's because of the administration's reluctance to admit failure. Note this next point. More likely, it's because the Biden administration doesn't see this as a failure at all, and in fact, their plans are succeeding. Just a little bit more than they had expected, he adds. And he goes on to say the Biden administration intentionally caused a surge of migrants across the border. It started on the first days of Biden's presidency. He announced a 100-day pause in deportations. That sent an immediate and undeniable signal to those in Mexico, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala. Migrants understood it as, quote, you have 100 days to make it to the U.S. If you make it in, you get to stay. And, of course, the Biden acting DHS Secretary of State at the time, certain non-citizens ordered deported to stay in the country will be allowed to stay because they want to have time to check things out, so they're not going to be deporting them. ICE officers, he points out that the situation for them is desperate. He said they're unable to remove more than 80% of the aliens who have been removed from the country under the Trump protocols. Undertaking the removal of a less threatening illegal alien now requires getting special permission from the anti-enforcement holdovers from the Obama years who are running the agency, and that is rarely granted. So he's pointing out this is not a failure in the way that we think it should be. It's what they wanted. It's what the Biden administration wanted. His point being, it's not a failure at all. Their plans are succeeding just a little bit better and more than they expected when it comes down to. And Governor Abbott says, this is just the beginning.
Americans need to know this. This is just the very beginning of what's going to be a massive expansion of the number of people coming across the border. It will grow tenfold and 100-fold, especially because of the way the Biden administration has handled this. Remember during the presidential campaign when all of the candidates said, we want open borders. Well, guess what? Biden has provided those open borders. He's inviting everybody in, and the floodgates are now open, and Texas is at the forefront of it.
And back to the article written by Chris Kobach, again, who had been a Trump informal advisor on immigration law, but also an expert on it. He said, so who's benefiting from all this absurdity reality? First and foremost, the Mexican cartels. They've seen their trafficking numbers triple. And it's just not human trafficking, it is drug trafficking. But cynical politicians on the left also benefit. They succeed in turning California blue over the past 2 decades by replacing U.S. citizen voters with low-income migrants who vote overwhelmingly Democrat. New Mexico followed, along with Arizona, which is in the process of flipping. But Texas, and Governor Abbott knows that, Texas is the ultimate target. And he states again, it is not an unexpected crisis. It is a plan that yielded bigger results than the Biden administration anticipated. We're the victims of a plan that they wanted anyway. Is it going to be stopped? Take a break. When we come back, Eric Swalwell still on an intel committee. One congressman says time to get his butt off.